Hi, I'm Benjamin Payne. At the K-12 Education Office at Hillsdale College, we support school founding groups and their efforts to start classical schools across the country. Finding the right leader is one of the first and most important steps to building a successful school. While we do consider experience in education, we seek candidates who exhibit unwavering personal integrity, honesty, courage, and servant-hearted leadership. Perhaps that's you. If you're looking to engage in fulfilling, impactful, and challenging work protecting our nation's future and building up the next generation of virtuous citizens, we'd love to hear from you. I'm looking for strong school leaders right now. Learn more about how you can make a difference at hillsdale.edu/leader. hillsdale.edu/LEADER. That's hillsdale.edu/leader.
Welcome to the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, bringing you insight into classical education and its unique emphasis on human virtue and moral character, responsible citizenship, content-rich curricula, and teacher-led classrooms. Now your host, Scott Bertram.
We continue a series of episodes from presentations delivered at Hoogland Center for Teacher Excellence seminars. The Hoogland Center for Teacher Excellence, an outreach of the Hillsdale College K-12 Education Office, offers educators the opportunity to deepen their content knowledge and refine their skills in the classroom. These one-day conferences are hosted during the academic year in cities across the nation and feature presentations by Hillsdale College faculty, K-12 office staff, and leaders in the Hillsdale network of member schools. There is no cost to attend, and attendees may earn professional development credits. Currently, the Hoogland Center is hosting a series exploring the art of teaching a variety of subjects. To learn more about upcoming events, visit our website, k12.hillsdale.edu.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm really grateful to be here in such a lovely place, thinking and talking and learning about literature with you. This afternoon, I want to bring us all into encounter with some poetry inspired by the great crisis of the American Civil War by two of our greatest American writers, Herman Melville and Walt Whitman. And along the way, I'd like to reflect on what poetry is, what it does, how it works. I'd like to identify the very different poetic projects of these two writers. And I'd like to close finally with what I think these poems have to offer us today in our own lives. In some ways, these writers make an odd couple. Melville came from a once prominent family and married into a prominent family. Whitman was working class. Melville saw the world. He sailed the oceans as a whaleman and lived with cannibal natives in Polynesia. He worked at a bowling alley in Hawaii. He traveled Europe and toured Egypt and the Holy Land. Whitman stayed in North America, exploring the globe only through books and museums and his imagination. Whitman's great book is poetry, Leaves of Grass. Melville's great book is fiction, Moby Dick. Whitman, an optimist to the very end of his life. Melville, always the skeptic, moodier, perpetually aware of the darker side of existence. Whitman, largely unconcerned with Christianity. Melville, grappling constantly with God. But in other ways, these men lived strangely parallel lives. Both born in the state of New York in 1819, they died only 6 months apart. Melville in 1891 and Whitman in 1892. Both men had ancestors on the Patriot side of the Revolutionary War. Neither went to college. They struggled to make a living as writers, and both worked government jobs to pay the bills. Both men endured scathing criticism of their work. A review of Melville's novel Pierre had the headline, "Herman Melville Crazy." And this one's my favorite. In 1855, one reviewer wrote that Whitman must have been, and this is a quote, "possessed of the soul of a sentimental donkey that had died of disappointed love." I like to think that was the good old days for book reviews. And both men attained much more literary fame after their deaths, of course, than during their lives. They also both lived through the Civil War, and each wrote a book of poems about it. Whitman's Drum Taps and sequel to Drum Taps in 1865, and Melville's Battle Pieces and Aspects of the War, 1866. These books are actually less familiar to most of us. Whitman is better known as the poet of the body and democracy, and perhaps people know his Lincoln elegies. But people hardly know Melville as a poet at all, but only for his sublime metaphysical whaling novel, Moby Dick. But I think that their Civil War writings include some of the best poems in American literature. And it is to a few of these poems that I want to turn today. And the text of these poems that we're going to look at are included in your blue folders, so you can read along when we get to it. But first, I want to make just a couple of brief observations about what poetry is and what it does. All poetry uses language to create beauty and to represent truth. Let's start with beauty. In a way, even before we understand a poem, we experience its beautiful sounds and rhythms. There's a pleasure in repeated sounds and rhythms. Aristotle calls it babble. It seems to be fundamental to the human species, actually, to babble. My 1-year-old has been babbling for months. And it's a good reminder to our students, many of whom will claim that they don't like poetry, that they do indeed like repeated sounds and rhythms. If they listen to music, whether it's hip hop or opera, these principles are here. There's a pleasure in it. Virtually every culture everywhere has had poetry, and it's fundamental to our species, it seems. But poetry also uses language to represent truth. I say represent, because all poetry represents reality in language. A poet has a particular experience and vision of something, a Greek vase, the sea, her flowers, his mistress, despair, childbirth, old age, and tries to capture that truth, that experience in language. This truth is more than what the eyes see, although poetry offers us many images in words. This truth is more than what the intellect knows, although we need our intellect to make sense of poetry. There's a third dimension here to poetry, which I'll call feeling, created through the beauty and through this careful combination of words and sounds. So when we read a poem carefully and intelligently and well and vulnerably, then our vision, our hearing, our minds and our hearts will resonate together at a certain frequency, which is something like that frequency at which the soul of the poet resonated when she wrote it, when she had that experience and put it into language. This is three-dimensional truth, if you want to call it that. Truth experienced in our minds and hearts and bodies, since emotions have a base in the body. Indeed, beauty and truth are really inseparable here, if we want to think about this. Perhaps this is why Keats famously writes in his ode on a Grecian urn that beauty is truth, beauty. Now, these two terms, truth and beauty, have everything to do with our subject this afternoon, for they actually capture not only how Melville and Whitman understood the war, but also the poems they wrote about it. Here's what I mean. Melville sees the Civil War as a crisis that reveals the true nature of things. And some of his best poems worked to utter that truth, to interpret what the war has revealed about America or the human species or God or the nature of the universe. Whitman sees the Civil War, yes, as tragic, but as creating great beauty, paradoxically creating great beauty. And his poems work to draw that beauty out of this very unexpected place of the Civil War. Let's start with Herman Melville's Battle Pieces and Aspects of the War. Now, neither poet served as a soldier, but both had personal experience with the Civil War. In 1864, Melville visited his cousin, a lieutenant in the New York 13th Cavalry in Virginia, and accompanied a Union scouting party in a fruitless pursuit of the notorious Confederate raider and guerrilla fighter John Singleton Mosby. Most of the poems were written, he says, after the fall of Richmond, and have a philosophical, a critical bent, interrogating the meaning of the war to see what truths it has revealed. Now, let's start with the first poem that's in your two handouts there, a utilitarian view of the Monitor's fight, about the famous duel of the two ironclad ships, the Monitor and the Virginia, at the Battle of Hampton Roads in 1862. Plain be the phrase, yet apt the verse, more ponderous than nimble. For since grimed war here laid aside his orient pomp, 'twould ill befit overmuch to ply the rhyme's barbaric symbol. Hail to victory without the God of glory, zeal that needs no fans of banners, plain mechanic power, plied cogently in war, now placed where war belongs, among the trades and artisans. Yet this was battle and intense, beyond the strife of fleets heroic, deadlier, closer, calm mid-storm, no passion, all went on by crank, pivot, and screw, and calculations of caloric. Needless to dwell, the story's known, the ringing of those plates on plates still ringeth round the world. The clangor of that blacksmith's fray, the anvil din, resounds this message from the fates. War shall yet be, and to the end, but war paint shows the streaks of weather. War yet shall be, but the warriors are now but operatives. War's made less grand than peace, and a singe runs through lace and feather. The poem's opening lines are deliberately ugly, full of clunky consonant clusters. Plain be the phrase, yet apt the verse, more ponderous than nimble. For since grimed war, that's a particularly awkward combination, here laid aside his orient pomp, 'twould ill befit overmuch to ply the rhyme's barbaric symbol. This is no place for melodious poetry, Melville suggests. If poetry represents reality, then this poem should have something of the clangor present in this mechanized war of plain mechanic power plied cogently. Notice that the word cog is inside the word cogently. This is a war of gears. But for Melville, this unaesthetic ironclad battle has revealed an important truth about war. Humans, and Americans as much as any, have covered up grimed war, decorating it with fancy uniforms, rituals, and dress parades. When we did this, we covered up, we hid from ourselves the bedrock fact that war is really about finding the most efficient and effective way to exert your power over other humans until they submit or die. Now, these ironclad ships have stripped away the decorations, the cosmetic covering we used to put on war. Now war paint shows the streaks of weather, and a singe runs through lace and feather. In this way, the poem's title makes sense too. The utilitarian would assess the war not in terms of its glory or heroism or ideals, but rather in terms of its effectiveness in bringing about some useful end. But the title also suggests that there is something else useful about the Monitor's fight. It has revealed to us the truth about war, which perhaps we knew but forgot, or which perhaps we knew but concealed even from ourselves. Now we see war as it really is, as less grand than peace. The very next poem in his book, titled Shiloh, a Requiem, April 1862, also suggests and really dramatizes, although in very different language, with very different sounds, that the war reveals a hidden truth about what really matters in human life and what doesn't really matter. The scene is the incredible slaughter of Pittsburgh Landing, called the Battle of Shiloh, for the nearby log church, the Shiloh Meeting House. You'll notice just how different the sounds are in this poem. Skimming lightly, wheeling still, the swallows fly low over the field in clouded days, the forest field of Shiloh. Over the field where April rain solaced the parched ones, stretched in pain through the pause of night that followed the Sunday fight around the church of Shiloh. The church so lone, the log-built one that echoed to many a parting groan and natural prayer of dying foemen mingled there. Foemen at morn, but friends at eve. Fame or country least their care, what like a bullet can undeceive. But now they lie low, while over them the swallows skim, and all is hushed at Shiloh. Melville lets the irony hang in the air. This horrific battle between mainly Christian armies happened on a Sunday around a church. In the 19 lines of verse, the church so lone occupies the precise center of the poem. We don't have to be strict Sabbatarians to wonder with Melville whether killing people on the Lord's Day in the vicinity of a chapel is really what the Almighty had intended for his children. Ironically, the battle has reconciled the enemies, foemen at morn, but friends at eve. Yet it has done so by revealing an uncomfortable truth. In the grand scheme of things, the relative insignificance of the things they fought for, fame or country least their care, what like a bullet can undeceive. That's a devastating pair of lines in which fame and country are an illusion, even a deception, just like the orient pomp of war in the previous poem. Somehow when a bullet strikes bone, things become crystal clear. Now for Melville, the most devastating truth revealed by the war occurs in a very unexpected place: the draft riots in New York City in July of 1863. It was a very hot summer that year, and the riots were sparked by resentment among working-class whites, especially Irish, over the draft in the North. These draft riots quickly spiraled into a race riot as white mobs wreaked havoc for 5 days, burning an orphanage for black children and lynching 11 black men. The riots ended only when over 4,000 federal troops put down the mob and restored the city to peace. Melville wrote the housetop in response to this disaster, where the speaker of the poem looks out at the scene from a housetop. No sleep. The sultriness pervades the air and binds the brain, a dense oppression such as tawny tigers feel in matted shades, vexing their blood and making apt for ravage. Beneath the stars, the roofy desert spreads, vacant as Libya. All is hushed nearby, yet fitfully from far breaks a mixed surf of muffled sound, the atheist roar of riot. Yonder where parching Sirius set in drought, baleful glares red arson, there and there. The town is taken by its rats, ship rats and rats of the wharves, all civil charms and priestly spells which late held hearts in awe, fear-bound, subjected to a better sway than sway of self. These like a dream dissolve, and man rebounds whole eons back in nature. Hail to the low, dull rumble, dull and dead and ponderous drag that shakes the wall. Wise Draco comes, deep in the midnight roll of black artillery. He comes, though late, in code corroborating Calvin's creed and cynic tyrannies of honest kings. He comes, nor parleys, and the town redeemed gives thanks devout, nor being thankful heeds the grimy slur on the Republic's faith implied, which holds that man is naturally good, and more, is nature's Roman, never to be scourged. This dark poem likewise presents the war as stripping away illusion and revealing uncomfortable truth. Melville's speaker calls law and religion merely civil charms and priestly spells. They have no deep reality, no permanent hold on us, no transformative influence over the human. They just keep us in awe and fear-bound. We have told ourselves, Melville suggests, that these institutions, law and religion, make up the bedrock of our American society, but when they are tested by war, these, like a dream, dissolve. The riots also reveal the folly of American optimism about human progress and development. For man rebounds whole eons back in nature. Humans devolve in the blink of an eye to savagery. The poem hails the arrival of law and order, but frames it in terms of the extremely harsh law code of the Athenian Draco. The poem interprets these horrible events as supporting the doctrine of the total depravity of man, which he calls Calvin's creed, and the cynical beliefs of even honest kings who deep down believe that humans must really be ruled by force. So for Melville, both the riots and their suppression by military power cast doubt on man's ability to govern himself. This is the grimy slur on the Republic's faith implied, which holds that man is naturally good. Now, the founders knew we weren't angels. Madison admits it in Federalist 51. Still, they had to believe we were good enough to govern ourselves by law and common consent, even if at times we get rowdy and concupiscent. But Melville's poem says no in thunder. If New York City can only have law and order at the point of a bayonet, this is a grimy slur on the Republic's faith. Melville wonders if the founders' dream of a people peaceably governing themselves was only an illusion to begin with, and the Civil War is the rude awakening to the cold light of truth. What makes Melville's poem so devastating is that we can see the draft riot and its suppression by federal troops as a microcosm version of the whole Civil War. You have violent insurrection and racism that can only be stopped by artillery. Not by self-control, not by religion or persuasion or rational discourse or law. It's worth pausing to note that Melville opposes slavery and secession, but as a thinker and a poet, he was really too honest not to say what he saw. That the Civil War may have revealed a bitter truth that we would much rather have hidden from ourselves. That humans might not really be capable of self-government. It's pretty grim stuff. You can see why after a decade, Melville's book had only sold 525 copies. Really, no one read anything that Melville wrote hardly after his first couple books. Perhaps Americans grieving their dead and trying to pick up the pieces were not very interested in asking whether the war had shown the American experiment to be folly. Melville's poetic project of asking hard questions and telling uncomfortable truths was never a popular one. His insight that war strips away our illusions belongs to a later era. He would rest much more at home among the bitter literary responses, say, to the First World War. Now let's turn to Walt Whitman and his book Drum Taps and sequel to Drum Taps for a very different vision of the war captured in verse. Whitman, too, had firsthand experience of the Civil War. In December of 1862, his brother George received a wound at the Battle of Fredericksburg. Whitman went immediately to find him, and when he arrived, one of his first sights outside a field hospital was, as he wrote about it later, a heap of amputated feet, legs, arms, hands, and etc., a full load for a one-horse cart. Now, this image of the mangled bodies of American soldiers made a permanent impression on Whitman. His brother recovered quickly, and then Whitman began one of the most important labors of his entire life. He moved to Washington, D.C., and began volunteering in the war hospitals. Over the next couple of years, Whitman would visit thousands of sick, wounded, and dying soldiers there. He was not a doctor or a nurse, but he participated in that other side of healing work. He offered comfort and companionship to the men so far from their homes. He talked with them, brought them ice cream, tobacco, books. He wrote letters for those who couldn't write, and sometimes he just sat with them while they died. During these years, Whitman has a paradoxical experience of beauty in the midst of horror. And this is how his best Civil War poems imagine this awful crisis, as creating unexpected moments of beauty. Let's begin with his short lyric, Cavalry Crossing a Ford, to see a small example of what I mean. I think this is at the end of your first handout. Yeah, that's right. A line in long array where they wind betwixt green islands. They take a serpentine course. Their arms flash in the sun. Hark to the musical clank. Behold the silvery river. In it the splashing horses loitering stop to drink. Behold the brown-faced men, each group, each person a picture. The negligent rest on the saddles. Some emerge on the opposite bank. Others are just entering the ford, while scarlet and blue and snowy white, the Guidon flags flutter gaily in the wind. The sounds here are beautiful. We have the alliteration of repeated initial consonants, as in line and long, and the assonance of the repeated vowels in line, wind, islands, serpentine. We have onomatopoetic words or imitative words like clank and splashing, words that imitate or try to put phonetics to the sounds that are heard. And the images are beautiful. We have strong colors, green, silver, brown, scarlet, blue, and white. The poem is self-consciously pictorial or imagistic, telling us twice to behold. And at the heart of the poem, in the very center of the central line, we have the beauty of the human form, each person a picture. Whitman offers us a simple poem, really an image without interpretation that anticipates like the imagism of Ezra Pound in the early 20th century. But this very short lyric, I think, captures what I'm seeing in Whitman, a moment of beauty, natural beauty, human beauty especially, even in the midst of war. Whitman goes further in other poems to represent how even the ugliest realities of the war create opportunities for beauty. Let's turn to his famous hospital poem, The Wound Dresser. I think it's good, I took a risk here in reading these poems aloud, but I think it's good for our students to hear us like lovingly and reverently read. And I think also just the attention that's required for us and for our students is really good for our souls to just attend to one thing together. We're hearing from my teachers, Whitman and Melville, right? So this is the Wound Dresser. And if you've been to Washington, D.C., you know that on the DuPont Circle Metro, as you go up that long escalator in the concrete, are engraved some lines from this poem. An old man, bending, I come among new faces. Years looking backward, resuming in answer to children. Come tell us, old man, as from young men and maidens that love me. Aroused and angry, I'd thought to beat the alarm and urge relentless war. But soon my fingers failed me. My face drooped and I resigned myself to sit by the wounded and soothe them or silently watch the dead. Years hence of these scenes, of these furious passions, these chances, of unsurpassed heroes, was one side so brave, the other was equally brave. Now be witness again. Paint the mightiest armies of earth. Of those armies so rapid, so wondrous, what saw you to tell us? What stays with you latest and deepest? Of curious panics, of hard-fought engagements, or sieges tremendous, what deepest remains? O maidens and young men I love and that love me, what you ask of my days, those the strangest and sudden your talking recalls. Soldier alert, I arrive after a long march covered with sweat and dust. In the nick of time I come, plunge in the fight, loudly rush Shout in the rush of successful charge. Enter the captured work, yet lo, like a swift-running river they fade. Pass and are gone, they fade. I dwell not on soldiers' perils or soldiers' joys. Both I remember well, many of the hardships, few the joys. Yet I was content. But in silence, in dreams' projections, while the world of gain and appearance and mirth goes on, so soon what is over forgotten, and waves wash the imprints off the sand. With hinged knees returning, I enter the doors, while for you up there, whoever you are, follow without noise and be of strong heart. Bearing the bandages, water and sponge, straight and swift to my wounded I go, where they lie on the ground after the battle brought in, where their priceless blood reddens the grass, the ground, or to the rows of the hospital tent, or under the roofed hospital, to the long rows of cots up and down each side I return, to each and all, one after another I draw near, not one do I miss. An attendant follows, holding a tray. He carries a refuse pail, soon to be filled with clotted rags and blood, emptied and filled again. I onward go. I stop. With hinged knees and steady hand to dress wounds, I am firm with each. The pangs are sharp yet unavoidable. One turns to me his appealing eyes. Poor boy, I never knew you. Yet I think I could not refuse this moment to die for you if that would save you. On I go. Open doors of time. Open hospital doors. The crushed head I dress. Poor crazed hand, tear not the bandage away. The neck of the cavalryman with the bullet through and through I examine. Hard the breathing rattles, quite glazed already the eye, yet life struggles hard. Come, sweet death, be persuaded, O beautiful death. In mercy, come quickly. From the stump of the arm, the amputated hand, I undo the clotted lint, remove the slough, wash off the matter and blood. Back on his pillow the soldier bends, with curved neck and side-falling head. His eyes are closed, his face is pale. He dares not look on the bloody stump, and has not yet looked on it. I dress a wound in the side, deep, deep. But a day or two more, for see the frame all wasted and sinking in the yellow-blue countenance see. I dress the perforated shoulder, the foot with the bullet wound, cleanse the one with a gnawing and putrid gangrene, so sickening, so offensive, while the attendant stands beside me holding the tray and pail. I am faithful. I do not give out. The fractured thigh, the knee, the wound in the abdomen, these and more I dress with impassive hand, yet deep in my breast a fire, a burning flame. Thus in silence, in dreams' projections, returning, resuming, I thread my way through the hospitals. The hurt and wounded I pacify with soothing hand. I sit by the restless all the dark night. Some are so young. Some suffer so much. I recall the experience, sweet and sad. Many a soldier's loving arms about this neck have crossed and rested. Many a soldier's kiss dwells on these bearded lips. The poem's first section plants a question that the speaker will answer at the end. What stays with you latest and deepest, and what deepest remains from his experience of the war? Here it's not the soldier's life, not memories of combat that endure in the speaker's mind, but rather the hospital scenes. Civil War hospitals were about as grisly as any battlefield. American doctors knew nothing of germ theory. Hospitals had no antiseptics or antibiotics and only rudimentary anesthetics. Amputation was common, gangrene and infection widespread. Whitman doesn't shy away from this in his poem. In fact, his hospital poems are part of a larger shift in American literature toward realism. This comes partly out of the Civil War. In section 1, he depicts clotted rags and blood. In section 2, we see the pus and other discharge from oozing amputation wounds, the slough, the matter and blood, as well as the sights and smells of infection, gnawing and putrid gangrene, so sickening, so offensive. We have the psychological realism of the soldier's trauma from amputation. He dares not look on the bloody stump, Whitman writes, and has not yet looked at it. But Whitman sees the hideous suffering in the hospitals as actually creating moments of beauty, which his poetry draws out. Whitman's choice of words and images links the dying soldiers with the heroic and redemptive sacrifice of Jesus. Their priceless blood reddens the grass, he tells us in section 1. And in section 3, we see a wound in the side. Death itself even becomes beautiful as a peaceful release from pain. Come quickly, come sweet death, be persuaded, O beautiful death. In mercy, come quickly. The suffering and the vulnerability, the need of the men also transforms the hospital into a place of beautiful love and tenderness, in a way creating the very antidote to war. He says, poor boy, in section 2, I never knew you, yet I think I could not refuse this moment to die for you if that would save you. So if war is started by hatred and selfishness, this is the opposite of that. Indeed, in section 4, the speaker says, the hurt and wounded I pacify. Notice that word, pacify. The healer's word choice here is brilliant. This hospital work brings peace, the opposite of war. Finally, the most lasting realities created by the war are these moments of beauty and tenderness and courage and love. The last 3 lines of the poem answer that question raised in section 1, what deepest remains from the war. The speaker concludes, I recall the experience sweet and sad. Notice that pairing of words, sweet and sad. Many a soldier's loving arms about this neck have crossed and rested. Many a soldier's kiss dwells on these bearded lips. This is an era where non-sexual physical affection between men was much more common in friendship. In Whitman's poetic vision, what the awful war has created is love and friendship, tenderness, gentle care for the vulnerable. And that is what still dwells, and notice that's the present tense. The speaker is an old man now, long after the war, but it still dwells in the speaker. The war has created unexpected beauty in the virtues and relationships of the men. The language of Whitman's poetry draws our attention to that beauty and represents it as the most enduring thing of the war. Now let's turn to our last poem, Whitman's Vigil Strange I Kept on the Field One Night. This poem describes a vigil strange because everything about it is wrong. In the 19th century, Americans had certain expectations about the proper way to die. And I think if we reflected on it, we would share a lot of those still. Perhaps just we would have the assumptions about them. This comes from the long Christian tradition of the ars moriendi, the art of dying. The good death is this. You should know that you're dying and be able to prepare your soul. You should die at home, surrounded by family, and die with some hope for resurrection. Finally, you should receive a proper and usually religious burial. But in the Civil War, dying suddenly became very different. You have armies of 50 or 100,000 men uprooted and scattered all over the country, hundreds of miles from home. Many die suddenly with no time to prepare for death. Some men get obliterated by artillery, leaving no remains to bury. Some men go missing and are never found. So some families have no body to bury, no funeral to attend. They lose some of the healing rituals of grief and mourning. But Whitman's poem works to fill in this gap by dramatizing an improvised but still beautiful ritual of good death and burial, even amidst the chaos of war. Vigil strange I kept on the field one night, when you, my son and my comrade, dropped at my side that day. One look I but gave, which your dear eyes returned, with a look I shall never forget. One touch of your hand to mine, O boy, reached up as you lay on the ground. Then onward I sped in the battle, the even contested battle, till late in the night, relieved to the place at last, again I made my way. Found you in death, so cold, dear comrade. Found your body, son of responding kisses, never again on earth responding. Bared your face in the starlight, curious the scene. Cool blew the moderate night wind. Long there and then in vigil I stood, dimly around me the battlefield spreading. Vigil wondrous and vigil sweet there in the fragrant silent night. But not a tear fell, not even a long-drawn sigh. Long, long I gazed. Then on the earth, partially reclining, sat by your side, leaning my chin in my hands, passing sweet hours, immortal and mystic hours with you, dearest comrade. Not a tear, not a word. Vigil of silence, love, and death. Vigil for you, my son and my soldier, as onward silently stars aloft, eastward new ones upward stole. Vigil final for you, brave boy. I could not save you, swift was your death. I faithfully loved you and cared for you living. I think we shall surely meet again. Till at latest lingering of the night, indeed, just as the dawn appeared, my comrade I wrapped in his blanket, enveloped well his form, folded the blanket well, tucking it carefully overhead and carefully under feet. And there, and then, and bathed by the rising sun, my son in his grave, in his rude dug grave, I deposited. Ending my vigil strange with that. Vigil of night and battlefield dim, vigil for boy of responding kisses, never again on earth responding. Vigil for comrade swiftly slain, vigil I never forget. How as day brightened, I rose from the chill ground and folded my soldier well in his blanket and buried him where he fell. The poem has a solemn rhythm, perhaps from the long lines and Whitman's use of dactyls. We hear frequent repetition of words and phrases, like the word vigil occurs 12 times in the 26 lines of the poem. This poem is the funeral chant for the soldier. The poem doesn't tell us whether the dead soldier is the speaker's literal son or whether it's just the common term of endearment for a younger man. But by calling him my son, the speaker signals that in some way the soldier died with and was buried by his kin, even if only a surrogate father comrade, a family nonetheless. The poem dramatizes some hope of resurrection. Whitman's speaker tells the dead soldier, I think we shall surely meet again. He describes new stars rising in the night sky, evoking mythological figures who received immortality by becoming a new constellation. Even the timing of burial indicates resurrection. And there and then, and bathed by the rising sun, my son in his grave, in his rude dug grave, I deposited. Whitman links those homophones, son and son, both will rise again. The poem improvises a battlefield burial, but it does so with great reverence and meticulous attention to detail. The speaker chooses a quiet, beautiful moment at night in solitude after the heat of the day and the battle, the cool night wind, the fragrant, silent night. Notice that the speaker describes how carefully he buried the soldier. My comrade I wrapped in his blanket, enveloped well his form, folded the blanket well, tucking it carefully overhead and carefully under feet. The word tucking here beautifully suggests the tenderness of a father putting his child to bed. The doubled adverbs well and carefully do something in the poem that was often impossible under the pressures of the Civil War. Because of the urgency of military movements, the summer heat, and the unimaginable number of casualties, many of the Civil War dead get tumbled into communal graves or hastily buried even in shallow soil. And you can see in Civil War photographs that the bones of the dead are regularly just loose on the battlefields. Whitman answers this problem in his poem by depicting a beautiful and reverent and individual burial. One final note about the poem, part of the beauty of it lies in what the language withholds. Whitman doesn't give us the dead soldier's name. He also doesn't say whether he died for Union or Confederacy. Part of the beauty of the poem is that the mourning and the ritual it represents are deliberately universal for any and all of the Civil War dead. I've tried to show here that these two poets see the Civil War very differently, and that their poetry follows their vision of the war. Herman Melville sees the crisis of the war as revealing the bedrock of truth, perhaps truth we did not know or truth we did know and were hiding from ourselves. His poems highlight that truth, our capacity for violence, the false narratives we tell ourselves about why we act or what really matters. By contrast, Whitman sees the war, even the worst parts of the war, as places where unexpected beauty emerges, and his poems represent the beauty of bravery or sacrifice or the human form, the tender beauty of love. I think we need these poems and the poetic vision of both of these great American writers. I think, like all great literature, these poems transcend their particular circumstances, in this case, the Civil War, to offer us something for our own lives. I think we need these poems when crisis comes, and crisis does come to all of us. You already know that as well as I do. And when it comes, Melville is right. It does reveal something true. It will clarify our eyesight, and we will see the world or ourselves or some truth about the nature of things that we had not seen before. But Whitman is right too. We will find beauty, not just in spite of the crisis, but actually because of the crisis, in the crisis. In the crises of our lives, there will be beauty where we least expect it. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this lecture, we encourage you to visit our website, k12.hillsdale.edu, for additional information on upcoming Hoogland Center events and other free resources for educators.